And I am hitting the record button. Welcome, Jack, Hannah, Emma, we have KL, Madeline. Nice to see Knight again. Matthew, Sage, seeing some friendly faces. So some of you might be wondering, where's Lauren? Lauren is presenting at another conference today, but I'm Allison Smith. I'm the 4-H Youth Learning Experiences Coordinator, and I love to help Lauren out on teen science because they are so fun and I always learn so much, and I love seeing all of your questions. So keep those introductions coming. I love to see where you're all calling in from. It's great to see that we have Vermont, Maryland, California. Excellent. And so I just wanted to go over a few of the protocols today for virtual gatherings. I know many of you have been to these before, so you're probably well versed, but you will be muted today. This is a webinar style. So you have the chat box for when you want to make comments or give feedback, say hello to each other as you're doing with introductions. And then we also have the question and answer function where you can put your questions for our guest Amanda. As she's going through her content, you can just enter those in, and then what will happen is they get queued up. And if someone has the same question that you have, or you really like that question and you suddenly are wondering what the answer is to the question too, you can click the thumbs up and it'll upvote the questions. So that way I'll know which questions are the most burning in the audience, and we can get to those first. We just ask that you be courteous and respectful in that chat box. Just like, keep it to the content and stay on course. And we just ask that you engage and participate fully. And I know that from being here in the past, that you're all here to learn and have some fun and enjoy this topic. And I also wanted to mention that we do have some upcoming resources and programs for all of you. Stay tuned to our Natural Resources Management Academy, which will be happening this summer on July 17th. And Citizenship Washington Focus is another, this is a virtual program that will be happening over the summer. You can all learn about leadership and citizenship with high schoolers across the United States. Natural Resources Management Academy is going to be in person this year, so that's exciting. And then Summer of Science, we're hoping to be in person too. So there will be topics that will be posted soon. These are free events coming up with Lauren, and different topics in science that take you to different locations. As always, you can go to uvm.edu/extension/youth/announcements. The link is at the bottom there, and stay tuned to all of our upcoming great programs. And so finally, getting to our guest today, our topic is Becoming a Doctor, a look inside medical education and human physiology. And our presenter is Amanda Galenkamp. And I'm just going to say a little bit about her. So Amanda is a medical student at the University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine. Before starting at the college, she was a research scientist in human genetics lab at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, and obtained a master's degree in colorful Colorado. While Amanda finds almost everything about the human body fascinating, she has a particular interest in oncology. I'm going to butcher this, oncologic medicine. I'm going to let you say that better than I did, Amanda. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Amanda.
All right, thank you so much. Let me just share my screen here. Oh, it looks like you need to make me a co-host in order to share.
Sure.
So we'll have a brief pause. But it's yeah, oncologic, I think I can't even say it, is a hard word. So definitely a mouthful, but anyways, so thank you so much for the introductions. Hi, everybody. I'm going to try to see everything at once because I'm on one screen. So I apologize if I end up missing questions in the chat because things are all over the place. But so yes, my talk is going to be a little bit multifactorial today. We're going to talk about kind of the whole picture of what it's like to become a doctor, and more on the side of a student doctor, because that's my current role now. So I didn't put this in my presentation, but we're going to do kind of a 2 parts. So we're going to talk a little bit about what my journey was like to medical school, and then we'll have a fun little exercise at the end of the talk where we'll talk about some pathologies and kind of how we learn about pathology in medical school. Let me see. So Allison did a pretty good job of introducing me, but my name is Amanda, obviously, and I am a Vermonter. I'm actually from Addison County. If anyone is a Vermonter here, you might know where that is. And I was a 4-H'er as well. So it's nice to see lots of other 4-H'ers here today. Here's a picture of me and my 2 dogs. The black one is Lily and the brown one is Barrington. That's us hiking in Snowball in Hancock, Vermont, which I like to do a lot. If you've ever gone skiing there during the winter, that's what it looks like in the summer, which is kind of cool. And then here are some other beautiful places in Vermont that I've gotten to hike. So if anyone is into adventuring, I would highly recommend checking out Snake Mountain, which is down here at the bottom in Addison County. It's a really nice hike. And then obviously, as Allison mentioned, I am a medical student at the University of Vermont, Larner College of Medicine up in Burlington. I'm about 5 weeks away from finishing my first year, which is kind of exciting and crazy at the same time. And so, yeah, so we're going to start off with a question. And it's kind of about what you think the best path to medical school is. Should you go straight into medical school after college, take some time off, maybe a year or 2 and work at a really cool job, or maybe takes 5 years off if you really want to? So go ahead and pop your answers in the chat or the polling software.
Yep, and I just launched a poll so you can vote. If you for some reason can't see the poll, it's okay to put it in the chat too. And Amanda, don't worry, I will definitely fill you in on the chat and Q&A boxes.
Yeah, I think my chat box did disappear even though I had it open, so.
Okay. So right now it looks like most folks are saying take a year or 2 off between college and medical school. Okay. Will allow you to have fun, with 6 votes. And then we also had 3 votes for go straight to medical school right after college.
Okay. So the crazy thing is that there really isn't a good answer for this question because everybody kind of does their own thing. And I'm sorry, because I started off with a trick question, but that's kind of the whole point of the talk today, is that we're going to talk about what kind of the traditional and the non-traditional paths to medical school look like. So I made this lovely representation of what I think most people probably think of as the traditional route to medical school, which includes, going to college, maybe applying right out or taking a year to work and then going to medical school. When in reality, my path, and I think a lot of people's paths, kind of look more jagged, like the pole that says my path on the right. So I know this is probably a far way away for you guys, but I wanted to kind of go through what the pre-med quote unquote checklist is for people who are interested in going into medical school. These are obviously not hard and fast rules and things that everybody needs to do, but I figured I would clue you guys into some of the stuff that you have to do before you apply to medical school. So obviously going to college and getting your prerequisites done is the top of the list. And prerequisites are just the courses that medical schools require you to have before you start your education. And that's stuff like biology, chemistry, math, English, basic science classes. And that's something that when you get to college and you're interested in medical school, your advisor will tell you more about. And then the second one on my list, which I think is maybe the most important, is clinical experience. And that can take lots and lots of forms. So you can be a volunteer in the hospital or shadow. Maybe some of you guys have been in the hospital before and had a chance to follow a doctor around. You can even work in the hospital. And I think that this is the best way to figure out, A, if medicine is the way you want to go, and B, what kind of job you want to have in the medical field. Because there's tons and tons of different things you can do in medicine besides going through medical school. And so getting the opportunity to spend some time in the hospital or clinic is really awesome and helpful. And then, you'll see as we go through my presentation that research is something that a lot of pre-medical students do. I don't think it's important, or I don't think it's necessary, maybe I should say, for everybody to do some research, but a lot of pre-med students do. And then some of you may or may not recognize that acronym on the bottom. That is the MCAT exam, which you guys are probably familiar with, the SAT or the ACT that you take to get into college. The MCAT is basically that for medical school, and I think it stands for the Medical College Admissions Test. So after you've done all your prerequisites, you sit down and you study and you take this really long test, and then that test score goes to your colleges that you apply to for medical school. And obviously this is stuff you guys don't need to be worrying about right now, but I figured I would give you, kind of the skeleton of what it's like to be a pre-med. And then after all of that stuff, you actually get to apply to medical school. And so there's kind of 3 steps to the application process of going to medical school. There's the AAMC or AMCAS application, which is kind of, you guys are probably familiar with the Common App for undergraduate. It's kind of like that, where you fill out a bunch of questions, send it off to medical schools, and then if they really like you, they'll send you what's called a secondary application, which is basically them wanting to get to know you a little bit better. And so they'll send you some questions, you write some paragraphs and send it back to them. And then if they really, really like you, they'll invite you for an interview, which takes a couple of different forms depending on where you go for your interviews. I'm not going to get into too much detail about it unless you're curious, because I can talk about it for a while. And so then if they really, really, really like you after your interview, then they'll invite you to actually start medical school the next year. So this whole process of applying to medical school takes about a year. It's a really long process. The application will open in May, late May, early June, and then you actually start medical school the summer after you apply. So it can take a while, but it's definitely worth it if you're interested in going into medical school, because medical school is awesome. So I know that was a lot. It was a very high altitude view of what applying and getting ready to go to medical school looks like. But do you guys have any specific questions about what you have to do as a pre-med, or what any part of the process is like? If you don't, that's okay too, but feel free to put them in the Q&A box if you have any questions. And if not, we will move right along.
You can give a moment. Right now, we don't have any questions. I did remind the attendees that they can put them in that Q&A box. And if something comes in, I'll definitely have you hit pause and let you know.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so we'll move right on ahead. So here's our second poll question. What experiences do you think have the most influence on your future career choices? So do you think it's work, maybe interactions you have with people, classes you take, or maybe even your favorite pastime as a kid?
Great, the votes are coming in. Oh, this is really interesting. All right, let's see. We need a few more here. An opportunity for 1 or 2 more people. All right. Last call, I'm going to close it. And I'll share the results.
All right.
Can you see those?
I can. So it looks like I didn't fool you guys this time. I gave you an option for all of the above, which you'll learn as you take more classes and go through medical school. And if you see an all the above answer, it's probably all of the above. So you guys, I didn't trick you. So yeah, I mean, I think the fun thing about figuring out what you want to do is that every experience that you have along the way really influences what you decide to do as a future career. And that could be work experience. It could be, you know, talking with your neighbors or even a family member who may have had a significant life experience that, you know, really pulls on your heartstrings. The classes that you take in college obviously have a huge impact on what you decide to do. And even your favorite pastime as a kid. I mean, I was a 4-H kid. I really liked being around animals and learning about what goes on inside of their bodies. And so, you know, that for me kind of pushed me in the direction of medicine. So all of these things can be really important for deciding what you want to do in the future. Okay, so here we're going to get into kind of the meat and potatoes of how I ended up getting to medical school, because as you saw before, you know, I didn't take this nice linear route. I took this more jagged and kind of all over the place route to medical school. And if you guys remember from the previous poll about how many years you should take off in between medical school and college, funny enough, is I actually ended up in the 5-year after medical school bucket. And so I'll explain to you a little bit what I ended up doing, but did lots of stuff between graduating from college and going to medical school. So here's a picture. I know I told you guys earlier that I was a 4-H kid, but here's a picture of me in my show whites, showing my cow at the Addison County Fair and Field Days way back in the day. I won't tell you what year because it'll make me feel old. And then on the other side of the screen is me at the College of Medicine right after I received my white coat. And getting your white coat in the fall of your first year is a tradition that medical students go through, where you kind of officially join the medical community. And if you'll notice, you guys probably have seen doctors will wear the really long white coats, but medical students get the short white coats. And I think it's so that they can tell who we are, so they don't ask us any big important decisions or any big important questions. But that's still up for debate. Okay, so we'll start, I guess, with me going to college. I guess I did put the year in here, so I'm dating myself quite a bit. But in 2014, I graduated from Endicott College in Massachusetts with a degree in biology. I did lots and lots of research, which made me think that maybe I wanted to do research. I wasn't quite sure. I ended up publishing a paper in research, which was pretty cool, and gave a pretty big thesis presentation to all of the heads of the departments of the science community in my school. And it was pretty terrifying, but I made it through. And so I graduated from college, and I thought that research was probably what I wanted to do. And so my first job out of school, as Allison had said in my little bio, was working at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. And this is a really nice aerial view of the hospital. It's kind of a bunch of different buildings that they spliced together over the years. And I worked in a genetics lab with human DNA samples, which was really cool. I got to look at all the different changes in the genes of people with psychiatric and neurologic diseases, and try to make connections between their clinical symptoms and what was going on inside of their DNA. And then I also got to go into the hospital and actually recruit patients for these studies. And so I would put on my phlebotomy scrubs, which phlebotomy is when you draw blood from people. And I would walk around the hospital and talk to doctors and talk to patients. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really cool. And these doctors are really awesome and they know a lot of stuff and they have really great relationships with all these patients and they get to make such an impact on their lives. Maybe that's what I want to do with my life. And so that was kind of my first light bulb moment, if you will, that made me start thinking about medical school as my kind of future path. And then obviously I like to put this on here. I think having a ton of fun in your early 20s when you graduate from college is super important because having fun is fun. So after Massachusetts General Hospital, I started to think about medical school. And for me, I needed to do a little bit more schooling. And so I ended up going all the way out to Colorado to Regis University and doing a master's in biomedical science. It was a year program. It was really intense. It was lots of hard work. And it was meant to be kind of a post-baccalaureate program, which is something that a lot of people who end up going into medical school do. And I can talk more about it if you're interested. But essentially, you do a little bit more school just to show medical colleges that you can get really good grades and that you can work really hard. And it's a lot of hard work, but it was a lot of fun because we were out in Colorado. So after I graduated from Regis, I moved back home to Burlington, well, to Vermont, not quite to Burlington. And I actually worked as a medical assistant for a couple of years at the hospital, the University of Vermont Medical Center in urology, which is pretty interesting. Urology is the study of like the urinary system, basically. I took a year of physics, and then I took my MCAT and started interviews and the application process, which took about a year, as I said before. And then after I was done, I was accepted to the University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine. And that's where I am now. And like I said at the beginning, I have about 5 weeks left of my first year, which is really crazy. And I do want to talk a little bit about kind of what the structure of medical education is. So it's kind of an interesting thing because each one of our days are different. So we kind of have a mix and match of different kinds of classes every day. The first semester of college, or of medical school, excuse me, is all about learning about basic science. So all of the normal human physiology, which is just kind of how the body works. We spend a whole semester talking about the kidneys and the heart and the skin and learning about all the little molecular changes that happen in your body on a normal day-to-day basis. And then after that, the second semester and beyond, we start learning about abnormal pathology, which is disease or just kind of abnormal things going on in the body. And there's kind of a bunch of different ways that we learn about these topics. We do lectures, which is kind of probably what you're used to, where you sit down and you listen to somebody and they tell you all the information that you need to know, and then you go home and you make flashcards or read textbooks or study. We also do something called case-based learning, which is basically they'll give us a little paragraph that has a bunch of information about a patient who hypothetically came into our office with hypothetical symptoms, and we have to try to figure out what's going on with that patient. And so we'll work in small groups, talk about all the stuff that we think might be going on, and answer lots of questions. We also do something called workshops, which is basically when we learn at home a ton of information and then come to class the next day and answer lots and lots of questions, either alone or in a group. We do something called team-based learning, which is what this picture is on the slide, where we study at home and then come to class and take quizzes alone, and then we take the same quiz with a group and answer more questions. And then my personal favorite, we get to do labs, which is we either look at human specimens, so pieces of organs or whole organs that were taken out of donors' bodies that are either healthy or not healthy. And we take a look at what's going on kind of as a gross image, which is something you can just see with your naked eye. And then we also do something called cadaver lab, where we learn anatomy, which is just kind of the basic structure of the human body, where we actually get to dissect human donors who have donated their bodies to medical education. So those are really cool because you get to actually see the stuff that you're learning about in class in front of you. And then we also have clinical skills where they basically teach us how to do all the physical exams and the questions that you get asked when you go to the doctor, so that we can make sure that we're doing and saying the right thing and testing what we need to test. I know I just talked for a while and said lots and lots of things. So if you guys have any questions at all about anything specific, what medical school is like, or maybe what my cadaver lab was like, or anything like that, feel free to pop those questions in the Q&A box. And I don't really see anything coming in. And if not, we will.
Yeah, it looks like things have been a little bit quiet, but we're also interested in the chat box if you just have some impressions about what Amanda shared with us about her path. I really enjoyed the thinking of it as a linear or the jagged line. And then, yeah, who wouldn't have some questions about what some of those labs are like? That is pretty interesting and very different from any life experience that I've had. So we do have a question that just came in.
Okay.
What medical school really hard?
Well, so it's not, let's see how I can answer that question. It's challenging. Yeah, it's a fast-paced learning environment. So you are learning a lot at a quicker pace than what you're used to in college. So in that aspect, it can be pretty hard. But after you get going, you can kind of get used to it. And so it's hard, but it's also really rewarding because you get to learn a lot of cool stuff.
I was thinking maybe I could ask a follow-up question. Maybe others are thinking of this too, but given that fast pace and how hard school can be, what you found helpful in helping you stick with it or get through the really hard times? What has helped you in your journey?
Yeah. So it's been interesting because I started in the middle of COVID-19. And so we had a little bit of a different experience, I think, than a lot of other medical students. But I have a really amazing group of friends that are all in my class and are going through the same stuff that I get to go through. And so sometimes we go and do things for fun, and sometimes we sit and complain about all the work that we have to do. But at the end of the day, all of the stuff that we learn is really, really cool. I mean, before you go to medical school, it's kind of, you dream about learning what's going on inside of the human body and finally getting to know kind of what makes diseases happen. And so getting to learn about that is pretty cool. It's really awesome.
That does sound so rewarding. So there are some more questions coming in.
Okay.
Asks, are the labs super clean?
Are the labs super clean? So they keep they keep all of our instruments and everything really clean, but the cadavers that we work on are all preserved. And so, there's like formaldehyde, and there are some like chemicals and stuff that the bodies are actually embalmed with. So we wear gloves, we wear special coats, and masks, obviously, even though we're in COVID-19, you would still wear a mask. And I do see this other question too. We do have to wear special clothes because if you like splash something or you get some like gunk on you, you don't want to be walking around with that around. So we do wear scrubs when we're in the anatomy labs. I hope that answered your question. How many years, so I see in your program, how many years will medical school be? So medical school is 4 years. It's kind of split in half. So the first 2 years you spend in the classroom learning all of the stuff in textbooks. And then the second 2 years you get to actually go into the hospital and start working under supervision, applying the knowledge that you learned in the first 2 years. So it's about 4 years of school, and then you go on to residency afterwards.
Those are some great questions. Definitely keep them coming. And if you have follow-up questions as well, you can pop those in the Q&A box.
Yeah, happy to answer any more questions. I love all of your questions. They're all great so far. Okay, so that was kind of our overview of everything that I did before starting medical school. And so now we're going to kind of switch gears and start talking about, okay, so now you've gotten into medical school, how do you start learning what is right and what is wrong? What is healthy and what is unhealthy? And so I put a little disclaimer in here because the next part of this talk, I'm going to actually be showing some human specimens. They're images, obviously, so they're not going to, I'm not like, you're not going to be touching anything, but you know, if that's something that makes you uncomfortable and you don't feel like you want to look at pictures of human organs, feel free to leave the Zoom at any time that you feel uncomfortable. So I talked about this a little bit. So there's kind of 2 ways that we learn about pathophysiology, which is the processes inside the body that will actually cause disease. We will actually do studying, like watching videos, talking with doctors, reading textbooks, and you know, fact sheets that were given to kind of start to understand what's going on in the body that may manifest as a disease. And then after we've learned, kind of, we have it in our head, we've drawn it on paper, we kind of have it visualized in our head, we'll actually go into the labs that I was telling you about, and we'll look at gross specimens, which are just the ones you can see with your naked eye. And then they could actually just be images that we were given in a PowerPoint, or they can be the physical tissue samples that we can actually pick up and hold. I had a professor who brought a whole bag of gallstones into one of our labs and dumped them out and let us squish them with our fingers to feel kind of what they are made out of. So when we have a patient who comes in with a gallstone, we can kind of understand, you know, will that stone be able to dissolve? Will the stone pass on its own? And it was kind of cool to be able to squish gallstones. Okay, so these next couple of images, I'm going to show you 2 organs side by side. I'm going to have you take a few seconds and try to figure out which organ we're looking at to start with, because these are just going to be organs. They're not in the body. So it's going to be, you're going to have to try to figure out what you're looking at. And then you're going to have to think about which organ you think is healthy and which is the unhealthy organ. And then I'll tell you which one is healthy and unhealthy, and I'll give you a few more seconds to think about maybe what you think is going on with that organ, what disease process is going on, or even just what the disease is called. And then obviously, ooh, I see somebody raise their hand.
We have a follow-up question about, again, if any of these photos will make you uncomfortable, you can certainly exit out.
Yeah. So if you don't like looking at organs at all, feel free to leave. That is totally fine with me. I will not be offended. Okay, so we're gonna get started. So this is our first image. I'll give you a few minutes or a few seconds maybe to kind of take a look at the two images, and either A or B will be the abnormal one. And I think, do we want to do it in the chat, Allison?
Yeah, let's use the chat box.
Okay, so go ahead and put in there which one you think is abnormal.
We have lots of A's coming in so far.
A's. Okay. Maybe I'll give you a few more seconds.
And Sage guesses that maybe they're blood cells.
Good. Does anyone else have any guesses of what we might be looking at? Blood cells. Do you know what kind of blood cells we might be looking at? Red blood cells? Wow, good job, guys. Okay. You're right. So these are red blood cells. So on the picture in A is our abnormal red blood cells, and then these really kind of pretty circles are our normal red blood cells. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to think about maybe what do you think this disease is, or what do you think is going on with our patient A? And you can put it in the chat. Lack of air, anemia, okay. You guys are pretty good. So those are all really good guesses. Bacteria, parasite could be. All these things can affect red blood cells. So I think actually, I saw KL put in the chat anemia, and that's actually, this is a special kind of anemia called sickle cell disease, sickle cell anemia. And you can see these circles here, the red blood cells kind of look like little sickles, which is an old farm tool that they used to use to cut down grass a long, long time ago that I don't think they use anymore. But that's what it's named after, that sickle shape that those red blood cells make. And sickle cell disease is actually one of the most common recessive genetic diseases in the world. And the reason why is because it actually has a protective effect against the malaria virus, which you guys may or may not know of. And so people who have sickle cell disease are actually less susceptible to malaria, which is kind of interesting. Or the malaria parasite, I should say. So what happens with sickle cell is that there's a molecule that lives inside of your red blood cells called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is the molecule that carries all your oxygen from your lungs out to all of the organs in your body. And it's really important because obviously all of our tissues really need oxygen to survive. What happens in sickle cell disease, as you can see in our little cartoon in the corner, is that instead of carrying the oxygen around, in certain conditions, this hemoglobin molecule will stick together. And it causes the red blood cells to go from that really nice disc shape to that sickle shape. And then, patients who have sickle cell disease can get those blood cells that kind of stuck in little vessels and can be really painful. And they can actually also undergo what's called an autosplenectomy, which after a long period of time, your spleen is kind of like your recycle center for all of your red blood cells. And so these red blood cells get stuck in the spleen, and the spleen will start to die over time. And so these patients with sickle cell disease can have some issues with infections because their spleen isn't doing so well. Do you guys have any questions about sickle cell disease at all? It's kind of cool that it has a protective effect against malaria. So it does have some good sides. Okay, I don't see anything popping up. Okay, so again, I'll have you guys take a few seconds to think about it, to tell me what organ you think we're in and what you think is abnormal. Okay, so I see kidney, I see brain.
This one's definitely feels harder.
Yeah, the first one I think was a little bit easier than this one. This one's a little bit harder.
And a reminder, you're asking us to put in the chat the A or B, whichever one we feel is abnormal.
Yeah, so you can put which one you think is abnormal. And then if you have a guess for what organ you think we're in, you can definitely put that in there too.
We're pretty split. We've got an A, a B. I'm seeing another B, more Bs. More guesses for kidney.
Sydney. Okay. You guys are spot on. So this is a kidney. And you're right, B is the abnormal version of the kidney. Do you guys have any idea what is going on with our patient B? It's okay if you don't know. Too much toxins. It's a good guess. Infection. Oh, chronic kidney disease. Wow, way to go. You even used the acronym. I'm really impressed. So this is actually kind of a funky word. This is called a white infarct. And what an infarct is in medical language is basically just the death of tissue because of lack of blood supply. So this over here, A, is our normal kidney. It's kind of pinkish orangish. I mean, it's out of the body, so it's not completely the color it might be. And then you can see B is kind of red and angry, and then it has that one white wedge in the middle of it. And that is our white infarct. And so what happens in infarcts is that you get these little blood clots that block off the tiny little vessels that are inside of organs like the kidney that don't have other ways to get blood. And so what happens is that tissue will actually start to die because it doesn't have any blood supply to that area. And patients can survive this because it's only a little part of the kidney. We can do surgeries to revascularize that area, which is really cool. They can take vessels from other places in the body and bridge it over to start feeding that kidney again, which is pretty awesome. It's like science fiction stuff. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting procedure, and patients can survive the white infarcts and do totally fine. Do you guys have any questions about infarcts at all? It can happen in a lot of different places. If you've ever heard of a myocardial infarction, that's a heart attack, and that's the same thing that's happening in this kidney is happening in the heart. And so that's what happens in a heart attack, which is kind of interesting. Okay, don't see any questions. So we'll move on to our next case. So I'm going to give you guys the organ that this is, because it's going to be like almost impossible for you to try to figure out where we are. So this is an esophagus. Oh my gosh, KL, you are killing it. Yes, this is an esophagus. Wow, you guys are great. So go ahead and put in the chat which one you think is normal and which one you think is abnormal. Or sorry, which one do you think is abnormal? Sorry. I tripped you guys up there. The cardiac sphincter. Have some of you guys taken anatomy? So I see a little bit of a mix. I see some A's and some B's. So let me see if I can advance here. So A is actually our abnormal esophagus. And I'll give you a little context before I have you guess and see where we are. We are pretty close to the cardia of the stomach, which is the top part of the stomach. So whoever put the cardiac sphincter, Madeline, I think you are pretty close to being spot on there. So if you can just take a second and think about maybe what's going on with our patient A, and you can put it in the chat if you have any guesses. Gastric acid. It's a good guess. Do you know what the name of the disease is for excessive gastric acid? It might be a little bit too advanced, but okay, you forgot it. That's okay. You're not a medical student, so you don't need to know it right now. So this is something that we call Barrett's esophagus, and it's a complication of something called GERD. If you guys have ever heard of GERD, G-E-R-D, which is just gastroesophageal reflux disease. Your grandmother had it. Yeah, lots of people have GERD. It's a really, really common, it's a really common disorder. So it's pretty normal. So you can see in B how our tissue is nice and pink. And you can see this is called a Z line. So this is the transition from the esophagus, which is lined by a certain kind of epithelial cells, to the stomach, which is a different kind of cells. And Barrett's esophagus is obviously the one on the left, our A patient. And it's really common. So it's pretty normal for your stomach to regurgitate acid into your esophagus. That happens all the time. But when it becomes excessive, that's when we have problems. And so I mentioned briefly before, there's two types of epithelial cells. And epithelial cells just means the cells that line the organ. The esophagus has what's called squamous cell epithelium, which is really thick. You can see in our cartoon here, it's like really thick. It'd be pretty hard to get through that, because when you're swallowing food, you really don't want anything poking through your esophagus. That would really stink. And then your stomach has goblet cells inside of its epithelium, because it needs to make mucus to protect itself from acid. And so what happens in Barrett's esophagus is that the squamous epithelium of your esophagus starts to get replaced by these cells that live usually in your intestines. And you might think to yourself, well, that sounds great. That sounds like a protective mechanism. Why wouldn't we want that? Yeah, so that exactly, the cells in the esophagus become basically stomach cells. And that's great, except for the problem that we have with this switch, which we call metaplasia, is that these new cells, because they've already undergone a change, are actually more susceptible to becoming cancerous cells. And so we need to be really careful to put people on medications that kind of suppress the acid so that we protect them from getting esophageal cancer, because that is something that obviously nobody wants to have. But yeah, lots of people have GERD, and a lot of people are on medication for it. So that way they don't have this problem. Kind of interesting. Any questions about that? I don't see anything popping up. Okay. Moving right along. We have a couple more, so I want to try to get through them. So go ahead and put in the chat if you think A or B is abnormal. And then you can, if you have a guess, see lots of these, you can try to tell me what organ we're in. This is also a hard one because it's not attached. Large intestine, lung, tailbone. That's a good guess. B. So you're right. Yeah, B is definitely the abnormal one. And we're actually in the pancreas. It's kind of hard to tell because the pancreas is usually attached to stuff, but right now this one's just kind of floating in space. So it's kind of hard to tell where we are. But you're really close though. Large intestine's pretty close. So the normal pancreas in A has this kind of like winged out part, which is actually the duodenum, which is part of the small intestine that it attaches to. And then this one over here, I don't think has that. You guys have any idea what's going on with our patient B? Cancer. It's a good guess. Anyone else have any guesses? Overproduction of pancreatic juices. That's also a really good guess. Not diabetes. Well, the pancreas is responsible for making insulin. So when the pancreas gets injured, that can cause some problems with blood sugar. Give you a few more seconds to think about it and then I'll move on. Okay. So this is actually chronic pancreatitis. And Madeline, you kind of hit it right on the head. So basically, you can see this pancreas is all kind of like white and shriveled looking. And this is fibrotic tissue. And that's basically a fancy word for saying it's a scar. And so this pancreas has been kind of beaten up over time, and it's kind of scarred down to get this like shriveled kind of saran wrap look to it compared to our healthy pancreas over here. And what happens in pancreatitis, like Madeline was saying, is that you get an injury to your pancreas, and your pancreas has a lot of digestive enzymes in it, which is really helpful for digesting food. But if those digestive enzymes get out of the pancreas and start digesting the pancreas, that's not so good. We don't really like that. And what happens in chronic pancreatitis is that this injury kind of happens over and over again. And there's these really awesome cells called stellate cells, which also live in our liver, that are stem cells and can actually regenerate some of the tissue. But when they get really irritated, they actually start to make scar tissue. And so that's why our pancreas from the previous slide was all scarred down and kind of yucky, and not nice and squishy like the other one. Any questions about that? I have one more, so I want to try to get to it before we finish up. Oh, actually I have two more, but that's okay. We might not be able to get to the last one. Okay, which one do you think is abnormal? And where do you think we are? Liver. A is abnormal. Liver, A. Seeing lots of A's. Yeah, you guys are exactly right. So this is an abnormal liver. What do you think is going on with our patient A? Any takers? No? Okay. So this is actually tumors. I see a virus. Someone popped in there. So this is actually tumors in the liver. And you can see I've drawn blue circles around them, these little like white balls that are in here. So far, the answers have been alternating like A, B, A, B. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have been more creative. So basically the liver, so there's lots and lots of different types of tumors that can live in the liver. The most common ones are what we call metastatic tumors, which is basically when cancer from another place in the body comes and lives in the liver. And the liver filters through lots and lots of blood from your intestines. And so it's a really easy place for cancer cells to come and hang out. And I put in here, there's a couple of other tumors in the corner. These are all tumors that arise from the liver cells themselves. They're much less common than tumors from another place in the body. Okay. I want to get to my last one. This one I think is pretty obvious to know where we are. So I might just have you guess which one you think is normal and which one you think is abnormal. I'm sorry. see A, they both look abnormal. B, Jack says, yeah. Both. And you guys are really sharp. Yeah, so both of these guys are abnormal. So this is one of my favorite things that I've seen in medical school so far. I think it's really gross in a cool way. Do you guys have any idea, before I move on, do you have any idea what's going on with either A or B? You can put either one in the chat. B is swelling like crazy. Yeah, it definitely is. It does look like a bad sunburn, doesn't it? Got into acid. So all really good guesses. So this one, A, is actually a bacterial infection. And Alice, you're right. It is basically like blood blisters. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what this bacteria does. It's pretty gross, but it's kind of cool at the same time. And then B does really look like they have a bad sunburn. But this is what's called a deep vein thrombosis, which some of you guys may have heard of before. So we'll talk a little bit about our friend Clostridium perfringens first. So Clostridium perfringens is a bacteria that can cause food poisoning. But if it gets into wounds, it can cause those really bad blisters like we saw in the image in our patient A. And what happens is basically they make your vessels really leaky, and those vessels will leak out and cause these blood blisters like Alice had said. And then deep vein thrombosis is another, I'm noticing there's a theme here, is another blood clot. And it can, a lot of patients who are in the hospital for a long time who are just not moving around can end up with a blood clot in the vein of their thigh. And I put an image here. This picture over here, not the cartoon, is what's called a saddle embolus. And this can be really dangerous for patients who have that blood clot in their leg actually mobilize, what we call embolize, up into their lungs, and it can block the blood flow to their lungs, which can be really dangerous. But yeah, those are both some DVTs are pretty common. I think we see them a lot. Clostridium perfringens, I don't think you're going to see that a whole lot, but it's kind of a fun picture to look at. Okay, we got through them all just with a minute left. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box.
Before we head into final question and answer, I do have a final poll. This poll is for some feedback, and I just launched it. And I'd love for all of you to fill it out. Let us know how we're doing. They are anonymous. You can be honest. And then also, as you're thinking about your questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. So it was nice seeing you, Madeline. Mm-hmm. This was a really dynamic presentation, Amanda. And wow, those photos were crazy.
Yeah.
So looks like lots of the participants have enjoyed guessing and learning more about your journey. All right, I'm going to give final folks a chance to chime in on the poll. All right, what questions do we have? We've got a few participants who are hanging out with us, and definitely based on some of the answers, I would say we have some potential future med students.
Yeah.
Interested in careers in health.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys did really well. I'm really impressed with your knowledge.
I always wonder when you have a case like the bacteria, mm-hmm. it might be something that you don't see every day. How do doctors mesh the real experience that the patient is having with the opportunity to learn about something that is unique. I mean, is
Yeah.
patient privacy, or is there an opportunity for students to come in and learn?
Yeah, so I feel like it depends on if you, as a student, if you were there rotating with that doctor at the right time. Obviously, if there's something super unique in the hospital, I don't think they go out with a megaphone telling all the medical students to come check it out. Yeah, because we do want to be respectful, obviously, of patient privacy and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, so the way that medical students learn is we rotate with doctors in the hospital during our second 2 years. And so if we see something that's new and interesting, we'll actually talk about it with the patient and talk about what the patient's response and what their feelings are about their diagnosis as well. So it's a holistic experience.
And Madeline asked in the chat box, for people who donate their bodies to science, don't the physical diseases that they may have fade?
Yeah, so if they have, you're talking about like if they had an infection or something active or just in general, because a lot of these things, like we saw, if you remember our pancreas, which maybe I can go back to. So this pancreas, or even this liver, has been taken out of a body, right? And so the mark that disease left is still in the organ that was taken out of the patient. And so you may not see, if you had a viral infection or something, you might not see active virus, but something like cancer, which is actually just a malfunction with the normal cells of the body, will still be there when the organ is taken out of the patient. So we still do get to see that stuff when we're in lab.
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
All right, final opportunity to put a question in the Q&A box for those who are with us. Comments in the chat.
How was your day? It was great. I'm in medical neuroscience, so I'm learning about multiple sclerosis right now, which is a pretty interesting disease. Thank you for asking.
What kind of work, when you're learning about that, when you had listed out the different ways that you learn, is it a lot of clinics, workshops?
Yeah, it's mostly workshops that we end up doing. So we will like learn all this stuff beforehand, and then we'll go to class and just answer a lot of questions and talk about cases and stuff. Have I done anything with COVID yet? As in like to help like vaccinate or something like that. I am going to sign up for, I think, for a vaccine clinic to help vaccinate or coordinate vaccines, because I think it's important to do that. So, but I haven't seen any COVID patients. They won't let me do that. So
What a time to be in medical school, right?
yeah, it's our first course in our second semester was an infectious disease doctor who ran it. So we learned lots about COVID. It's really interesting. And we got to learn about the vaccines as they were getting rolled out, which was cool.
It's great.
Awesome.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. I enjoyed, and I'm sure everyone else did, hearing both about your path, but then also learning more about your field. And I feel like for virtual, we were able to get pretty hands-on throughout. That was really exciting. So thank you so much. And I think we're all set, unless you have any final words.
No, thank you guys so much for coming. And you guys were all like really spot on with your diagnoses. So I'm really impressed.
Excellent. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks.